Hello, everyone. So this was actually not my original post that I had here. So I had another web stream on and working for the Kuan Yin post with Buddha, but it went down as I was trying to get on. So I'm going to go ahead and make one more quick little post here to remind people where the live stream is. And then hopefully that works. We got 8 people. Okay, so people ended up finding me back in a quick second. Just want to make sure it is all set. How do we share this stream really fast? Everyone take a deep breath and let's set the intention that we're going to be doing this meditation together while I get this last little thing rolling. So it was unexpected. I was just loading and my system froze. So it was kind of like, whoa. Okay. All right. So now everything's posted. Now everything is good to go. So today we're going to be channeling Buddha and Kuan Yin. So Buddha is the original master of Buddhism. Kuan Yin can be considered as one of the angels of Buddhism. So the master always comes back to Buddha, but there are like these angels that help Buddha attain certain aspects. So I decided I was going to summon everybody, the whole entire crew, even though I'm going to still be just interviewing Kuan Yin and Buddha. Some of the questions that had come in are questions that they're kind of loaded. So there were a lot of questions actually for Buddha and Kuan Yin this time that I was not actually anticipating. And I basically made like a quick summary of the questions, like ones that I could answer so we can get a little bit of a rotation for everyone. And just want to make sure I have all those pulled up. And okay, cool. Woo. 2 more seconds. I had everything set and then this like little lag here threw me off. So just want to make sure I got all the questions because I know some people posted some new ones earlier. Okay. All right, so let's get started. Everyone, we're in the same room together. Before I decided to do this channeling, I was talking to Buddha and Kuan Yin all morning today, and they pretty much told me that they wanted to turn this channeling into a healing as well. So we're going to go ahead and set the intention that we're going to be meditating, getting a healing while we're still talking to the masters. Everyone who's present when we're doing this seal is going to be like the generator, keeping the momentum. So please stay present as that stabilizes the energy. We're going to call in Buddha. one of the avatars of Vishnu. We're going to call in Kuan Yin Avalokitesvara. We're going to call in Manjushri and Vajrapani. Everyone take a deep breath. And relax. One more deep breath. Okay. So I decided to put some music in the background because it helps me stay a little bit more in the Zen. Let's get started. So we're going to start off with the original post that we had on Patreon. And we're going to start off with a great question. What is attachment? Is it moving back and forth between judgment and perception? What is judgment? The Buddha and Kuan Yin both have different perspectives on judgment. They would like to each contribute. The Buddha will go first. Attachment is a self-created perception of illusion that allows you to be more anchored in your creation. But if not managed properly, can become the ultimate demise to your greatest creation. All suffering stems from extreme attachment. Attachment to oneself is singular and different than attachment to the many and other perceptions outside of yourself. Deep breath. Attachment in itself is a creation that one uses to better solidify the image that they feel most comfortable with. A story is similar to an attachment as much as an attachment may be to a house or a child. Attachment is not entirely necessary, but can become very useful when in co-creation and self-creation. The fine line always maintains itself within the ego, the duality of self. When attachment becomes rigid, that you can no longer see the evolution of your own consciousness and the truth that hides deep within. Now, Kuan Yin would like to speak on behalf. Deep breath. Kuan Yin, what is attachment? From Kuan Yin's perspective, attachment is the ultimate understanding of what compassion can bring to the world. Attachment is another tool that one uses to amplify a vibration. Attachment can easily be seen under its lowest forms, unconsciously, as fear and suffering. Attachment can be easily used to create a higher sense of self that replenishes the collective. Attachment is something that does sway back and forth, similar to a river and a pendulum. Attachment is neither here or there. Attachment is something that exists within every aspect of every solution that exists everywhere. Allow yourself not to see attachment solely as a negative factor. Attachment as a tool for creation and growth is necessary. For when you anchor your vibration in any direction, what you do is create an attachment. It is vital to understand that attachment is only an illusionary construct, similar to time. All are attached to something, and all attachments are non-permanent. We only give value to the attachment that we create, so that we may justify it in the creation of our own personal universes. Attachment is not the enemy. It is a perception of attachment that one creates that can be their own downfall. Attachment is necessary to create a new earth and a new vibration that fits all. Attachment to self and love. Attachment for one and for all. By fulfilling your own personal vibration and the greater understanding of compassion and mercy. That is all for this question. Okay. So similarly, I guess, okay, so the first one was like, what is attachment? The second one is, could you explain what detachment is? How is one able to incorporate detachment in his daily activities? Buddha wants to answer this one. Take a deep breath. Detachment can be seen as a daily habit, a daily necessity, similar to breathing. When one breathes, one does so out of necessity. When one detaches, one does so from necessity. There is no difference between the breath and detachment. The only illusion is that of self. When we understand detachment, we provide a higher level of degree of self-care, for we choose to put ourselves and our universes first. Detachment is understanding that the illusion is perpetual, and you are fundamentally attached to this reality. But to understand that you are attached to this reality is also to understand duality and that we are not attached. Not even the matter that exists around us is solid. Nothing is attached other than the perception that we create to make ourselves feel comfortable that any one perception is solid. All perceptions are fragmented. All understandings will come back to one. Detachment is a simplistic necessity that each one of us have but do not execute. All of detachment comes back to the need for oneself and one's peace. Your detachment allows you to create new realities. Your detachment is one of the creations of Source. Your detachment is easily let go by opening up the centers of your mind to understand that nothing is permanent anyway. We create perceptions of permanence through culture, through advanced sciences. We believe that we will reach a level of understanding that levels the attachment we seek to becoming transcendental and permanent. That we may never fade away from the flows of existence. All the ebbs and flows of this reality show us how detachment is forced through the concepts of time and space, overpowering of the consciousness that we call a collective. Everything in this universe and in every universe perpetually changes. To change and to be one with the cosmic laws of the universe is to understand that nothing is solid, nothing is permanent. All is change, regardless if we witness it one for one in what you consider to be real time. Detachment is only a perception, my dear. One that you create by making an active effort to choose to not engage in anchoring yourself in something that was never solid to begin with. If all matter is only an illusion, the attachment to the events that we create are merely illusions that can help us grow or help us dwindle in any particular direction. All of detachment comes back down to these principles. Understanding that none of it is real and only the ego creates the pseudo attachments that we allow to become a materialized universe. Take a deep breath. That is all for this question. Okay. So we're gonna go and we're gonna ask Buddha and Kuan Yin or Manjushri. What is the differences between Samadhi and Nirvana or Nirvana? Manjushri and Buddha both want to speak on this. Manjushri is going to leave Buddha to speak first. And Buddha wants to speak from the level of understanding that is Vishnu. Everyone take another deep breath. Manjushri will want to start first. They're arguing right now, like, not really arguing, but they're like, yeah, you should go first. You should go first. And I'm like, no, you should do it. So Manjushri, they're going to do a split. They're going to fill in the blanks in certain areas so you get a well-rounded understanding. Manjushri is going to go first. To understand duality is to understand that there are many perceptions that lie within the multiverse of a singular understanding. That which you call Samadhi and that which you call Nirvana are essentially the same perspective under a different illusionary refraction. Nirvana, and this is both Manjushri and Buddha speaking, Nirvana is the understanding that one lets go of suffering or their attachment of suffering, whether that may be in the physical, through mental states, or through the esoteric, through spiritual states. Samadhi is to experience fullness within the present moment. In order for one to experience nirvana, one must be present with this moment. Samadhi allows us to see everything for what it is. Similar to nirvana, allows us to gain a higher perspective of what we seem to understand in either aspect as duality. Both are equally as important, but these concepts can change even through the Egyptian understandings of the 12 around one. It all comes back to being present in a moment, regardless of the level of understanding, whether it be transcending duality, transcending suffering, transcending the limits of compassion, transcending the lack of self-preservation and self-interest. It all comes back to this present moment. The present moment can be seen as source that fragments itself over dualistic concepts over and over. If the present moment turns out to be source, Samadhi, Nirvana, the 12, can be seen under any scope that allows any being to understand this same present moment, regardless of the perceptions of positive and negative. For you see, no matter which polarity, which understanding reaches the present moment, whatever the name of that present moment, whatever the understanding of that present moment that led them to the present now, would always be Samadhi and Nirvana, because the present moment would always resonate with Source and its multidimensional fractal. Take a deep breath. That is all for this question. And when I did the last question too, I'm going to take a quick second to pause really fast. When I answered the last question about detachment, I pulled out a tarot card to kind of help me, because I was getting a lot of information, and he came back to saying about nurturing yourself was the main thing to pay attention to. And then when it comes to Samadhi and Nirvana, like I just feel compelled to pull out another card. The main thing to understand is persistence. Like if you are persistent towards understanding what will lead you to your own nirvana, your own samadhi, that's why Buddha, like Manjushri is really good at understanding duality and going past duality. And this is one of his like ancient tools, which is like the sword of wisdom. And that's why when they both talk about samadhi and nirvana, you can easily understand that like for some people, like the vibration of love is like, oh, I love someone, right? And then for other people, it's like, oh, I really love myself, or I really love nature. All those come back to one fractal being love. And when you tap into your definition of being in the present moment, even if it's nameless, it would still be samadhi or nirvana. Or even if you called it something else, it would still be that present moment, just a different way of how you got there. So now we're going to go ahead and look at how do we stay balanced in the yin and the yang, the middle way, no matter what comes our way. If the answer is detachment, then my next question is how to detach from what we are even subconsciously holding on to. Okay. So this one's like a Kuan Yin one. I can feel it coming. Take a deep breath. Kuan Yin, the answer, yin and yang. How do we do this? One simplistic way to understand the middle way is to understand the levels of fragmentation in reality. There is always a positive, there is always a negative, and there is always that which you can create in between. The middle way would be the creation of both spectrums of reality that allow you to find an optimal solution. Detachment can be useful in this level of understanding towards the middle way. But you must understand the middle way has many different options. One must practice division of self, which is detachment, by letting go and fragmenting portions of your self-identity, an illusion that has been self-created. Mastering balancing the yin and the yang is co-creating between the both. There will always be struggle and tension. But I once was male and once was female. Both perceptions were exactly the same. It was only my temperament and my instinctual behavior that changed the same action into a different vibration of its form, the same instance seen under a different gaze. To balance the yin and the yang, one must understand that it is all in the present moment, the characteristic in which you seek. Your polarization of the image in which you enact is a choice that always comes after Source has enacted its free will. Source enacts its free will, and from there it takes form into masculine or feminine or the middle way. The definition of Source is androgynous. To even see yin and yang is to fragment the internal body. Understanding that the internal body is androgynous. It is sexual and asexual. It is more than just the male and the female, but everything in between. That will open the middle way. In order to detach from subconscious beliefs that polarize your ideal spectrum and your idealized perception, is to understand the illusion of self. For when you are in any one body, that body is polarized. On one end, in the material, male and female. Some are born in female physical terms and carry a male internalized perspective. Those beings are closer to Source, the people you may call two-spirited. For their yin and their yang have chosen to exist simultaneously in the present moment. But even though in these individuals, the spiritual power to harness duality exists, there is always conflict between both spectrums. For every being is a challenge to master androgyny. Androgyny is the only way to understand your truest nature. Evaluating yourself before you allow the spectrums of your sex, gender identity, or illusion of cultural practices that puts you into a binary state. It is important for you to always analyze and understand the original thought that is source inside of you before the fragmentation and devaluation of your internal structure begins. Take a deep breath. Detachment is not entirely necessary, but it is necessary in certain aspects as we get closer to androgyny. Every being has attachments to the male and to the female, consciously or unconsciously. Every being can bring the consciousness into the unconscious and the unconscious into the consciousness. It is understanding that every option exists right this moment and making a concentrated effort to abandon all constructs of the yin and the yang, for you will instantaneously abandon the constructs of polarity and duality and reach the highest state possible in that present moment. Again, referring closer to Nirvana and Samadhi, everything in between. That is all for this question. Okay. This one's for Kuan Yin again. What are the qualities of compassion? Do we connect with this vibration as that is similar to opening up an app on our phones, as Master A teaches us, or is there more involved? So what are the qualities of compassion? Okay. Deep breath. So Kuan Yin, what are the qualities of compassion? Compassion comes primarily from understanding oneself. Your compassion can only grow once you've understood yourself and chosen to be merciful with yourself for the negative events that have followed throughout your existence in this incarnation, and the weaknesses which you choose to classify as faults. Compassion can be accessed as a frequency as easily as Antojai has brought to your intention, but it expands further than just understanding a frequency. For with every frequency that any individual chooses to immerse themselves into and merge with, that frequency will always bend all the flaws within a being's consciousness into being in resonance with that vibration. So when you tap into a vibration, you will naturally change and train your consciousness into a new form. Compassion, as you seek deeper into this vibration, will always come back to you. The flaws that you seek in another always is a reflection of self. The flaws that others seek in you are always a reflection of self. Compassion grows when we understand ourselves and we accept ourselves for what we are. For what else would we be? This creates a detachment of ego. For ego is what dictates whether we exist in polarity. It tells us what is right and what is wrong. We only find judgments when we are further and further away from our original perceptions of self, which is source in the present moment. Detachment happens when compassion is met. Compassion is not to put yourself at disservice of self, but is to understand. And when you are complete, you bring completeness to others by simply being in their presence. All are yin, all are yang. All are the middle way. The middle way is always the now. From here, we can practice the ultimate source of compassion, whatever that compassion may lead you to bring and believe. Again, Nirvana and Samadhi, understood as compassion for the self and for the universe. That is all for this question. Okay, take another deep breath. So the next question is, how do we embrace self-love and completely let go of our limiting beliefs from birth? Master Antojai has taught us much about this, that there is something about this, but is there something more that you can open our hearts so that we can reach the final stages of acceptance and forgiveness and surrender? So what is the question? How do we embrace self-love and completely let go of our self-limiting beliefs from birth? Buddha wants to speak on this one. Let's grab the sword again. Deep breath. The suffering that you undergo is only as strong as you allow the ego mind to be. Your ego mind is what seeks to find justice in any trauma that proceeds in your system. Your soul, similarly, is a collection of egos and fragmentation. In order to let go of inner child programming, one could easily let go of ego. The ego will fight tooth and nail so that you do not let go of the perception of reality that you've focused for such a long time to create. For it feels like it has that reality mastered. The ego has a self-interest of self-preservation. The ego is easily narcissistic. The ego will always find a reason for you to stay in the same space. And thus, your attachment to your ego will create the suffering that can never be let go throughout the times and ages. In order to let go of attachment to inner child programming, one must understand the ego is the greatest enemy. The ego that lies within the emotional body. For the emotional body is only a vehicle similar to the astral. It is the ego that sits in this vehicle and chooses to drive it, for no one has taught it any better on how to drive, or that it could have its privileges taken away. The ego is like a power-hungry teenager, and all teenagers lack the foresight to understand the greater truth that's right in front of them. every teenager will essentially run safety and comfort to its limits, jeopardizing their own existence, but always finding a way to retract any action that's been created. When we let go of inner child programming, we must understand that the illusion was agreed upon and created by the self. For we are only masters of our own reality. Mastering one's reality is to understand the integral connection that you had in the composition of your own reality. For reality cannot enact suffering upon an individual that is aware that the suffering was self-created. It is in those instances that suffering may seem funny, and all release has been attained. It's important to understand that there are many ways to release the ego, to release programmings without releasing the ego, and to find ways to completely supersede the ego. But nothing comes with a greater price than not being in the present moment with any of the level of understandings that you have acquired today. Many run in some shape or form from the actual trauma that lies deep within. Very few choose to confront it, no matter what the cost may be. As you run, you create tension within the internal structures of your universe. As you run, you may expand with an ultimate consequence of contraction that will force you to always attempt a reanalysis or turn for running towards the hills yet again. It is only those that recognize the ebb and flow of the programming that they choose not to run from are the ones that find success and evolving beyond the detachment that we each seek to let go of these programs. Understanding that the ego is one of the biggest contributing factors. The ego can easily be understood as a subconscious mind. For many find a detachment between the ego and the subconscious mind. The two are the same, only divided within yin and yang. Ego always being yang, the subconscious mind always being yin. For the subconscious mind is always seen as weaker, gentler, but always vicious, out of control, and in majority of control of the creations that we experience. We always see the mind, the subconscious mind, as a pseudo set of programming, and the ego to have a full form of conscious interaction. But the ego lies within the subconscious mind. So it is easy for both us to understand the ego and the subconscious mind are the same personality under a dualistic understanding of self. When you cease to empower the ego, you cease to empower the subconscious mind. When you reprogram the subconscious mind, you reprogram the ego. So is it not what we seek to reprogram the ego of the subconscious mind? That is all for this question. Okay. Taking a deep breath. So I have a question. I've always understood that a lot of high conscious people that have a purpose to deliver in this world have like this high vibration of royalty or kingship or something like that in their system. Buddha, you were born into a family of riches, and you eventually chose to walk away from what was a really cushy life. Why was it that you chose to leave, other than, understanding that you were seeing all this suffering in the world? Like, what? And even when you left your riches, you seem to have lived a very rich life. So riches was like a vibration that you carried. But what did you learn during your advancement of switching the material riches that people seek in today's society for spiritual riches? All is well, divided back to perception. When you perceive your riches to be of one quality, you materialize your perception into that exact manifestation. Many seem riches to be the abundance of matter. Spiritual riches can come in terms of self-knowledge, acknowledgement of external factors like the universe. But all abundance is only a state of consciousness. For the rich acquire their riches only to one day still ponder and question the greatest concepts of esoterica in the universe. So in the material, when those who acquire riches still pursue the spiritual to acquire self-fulfillment, what is the actual currency that makes a man rich? Is it the material that they have acquired or they were born into, that which they can touch and feel, or that which ignites their spirit to continuously propel itself forward? The ultimate truth always comes back to self-acknowledgement. This human reality has designed its entire spectrum of wealth to be matter, when wealth is a level of existence, a vibration that we open, that we understand. Wealth comes in a matter of ways that we fail to see in every day. We fail to see how attachment and detachment are constantly happening in every action, in every state of abundance. For some have a support system, others don't. For those who lack, they see abundance in having that support system. Often those who have the support system take their wealth for granted. And it is not until they hit a certain peak in their development where their support system is no longer there do they realize that they were once wealthy. These perceptions can go on in a myriad of understandings, similar to the man that goes homeless after being at the peak of his wealth, or someone who attained the highest levels of esoterica to then fall to the nothingness of absence. Even knowing the illusion of self can be a wealth. For if a man goes his entire life understanding a certain image of himself, just to one day wake up without any acknowledgement of who he used to be, that lack of his identity would always be considered his ultimate wealth that he will always try to reclaim in some way, shape, or form. This then will put a man under the scopes of time and space, making their life more rigid, longer, and difficult to attain, for now they live in the past. We say often that the present moment is what brings the highest calibration of any vibration. Wealth can bring you to a certain understanding within Samadhi, Nirvana, and compassion. It is your understanding that allows you to then shift the multitude of wealth that you have. But reality reconstructs itself around what you place your attention most on. Many focus on the lack of wealth, and thus they create reality focused on that observation. But finding wealth and understanding within your day-to-day present moment allows you to perpetually live in abundance. For we are all kings. We have forgotten how to do so. So when I decided to leave my father's kingdom, I did so only because I knew my wealth was never bound to a structure that was going to physically define the amount of wealth that I carried inside. And as I continued to live my life, I understood that my abundance, myself, my kingdom, would follow me, follow my essence. For I was mastering my kingship within my own reality at every moment, with my own consciousness. I was the king of my reality, and others simply followed. Though I never considered myself a king by right, because I chose to walk away, I understood the vibration of kingship was a vibration that anyone could attain if they truly understood themselves and understood the root causes of their suffering. I would have suffered staying in my father's castle, disconnected from the rest of my understanding that lied across the world. I chose to let go of my attachment to my comfort, only to embrace the power of what was actually always present within me. This is all pertaining to this question. Okay. We're at an hour. Holy crap. Okay. I answered a pretty good, juicy amount of questions. Let's see if there's another question in here that I can take. Okay, we're going to take another deep breath. And I'm being told by Kuan Yin that anyone who wants to meditate with Kuan Yin and diverse that energy with a group, to put up your right hand like this, and then to allow Kuan Yin to resonate with you. If you want to work with Buddha, Buddha wants you to put your hand like this and just allow Buddha's energy to step in. I'm going to do this in 3, 2, 1. Deep breath. We have another good question. I'd like to know how they suggest we help those who are struggling with change and are still attached to the way things were before. Buddha states you can only help yourself and your own understanding, and show them what happens by experiencing your level of existence. Kuan Yin states you should have compassion for understanding their lack of self and understanding, and being open and available for them when they are willing to make their shift is all that is necessary. Both state that the shift that is happening now is meant for every individual to undertake on their own, not because we are not operating as a collective, but each individual collective being must come to a headway where they choose not to run from the darkness that they have created internally. They must understand the truth that they've been running from, that has manifested itself as the shadow, as darkness. But simply, this is just an ultimate truth. Understanding this global shift is to simply be present in each of our unique powers for those who are willing to accept and make that shift. All we can do is become present and open and available for that shift. Compassion is to stay open when those come. Compassion is also to understand that we cannot burden ourselves with the developmental trauma of others. All must seek their way to Nirvana by choosing to let go of suffering on their own, whether that may be compassion, wealth, manifestation, or Samadhi. And I keep hearing is like what most we can do is bring wisdom. What most we can do is bring wisdom. What most we can do is bring wisdom. And like I've said this in other like podcasts and stuff like that, where like right now it's not a moment for us to be like saving other people. It's a moment for us to be here giving people back the power inside of themselves to understand why something's happening and why they're struggling in general. And this is one of those things that's really difficult for even me sometimes, because I'll be working with people and you can work with someone for such a long time and they understand at some cognitive level, you know, that they have to let go of this pain and this negativity, but they don't want to. They don't want to because they don't know how to. They don't know how they could just let it go. And all you can ever do really, you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make it like drink, right? So you can only always be present with the information and the wisdom that you carry, like Kuan Yin tells us, and just, you know, allow yourself to be that energy and that presence whenever someone comes to you with an answer. But it's also kind of like it's understanding that like us taking on other people's suffering is bringing our own suffering into a new creation. And that's what happens a lot. And I'm channeling this hard as like everyone's talking to me at once. Like a lot of times healers see other people suffering and they take on that suffering personally, especially empaths. And when you take on that suffering, like you're not in this cognitive state of understanding that you're retransmuting whatever pain that you've dealt with, and you're just giving it a new form by saying, oh, it's coming from someone else, I feel bad for this person, so oh, I just wish I could do something for them. And it's not saying that you don't have empathy, but because empathy is necessary to exist and produce telepathy. But when we become attached to like, I really want to help this person, but they won't help themselves, we create a level of suffering that works against us. And what we're doing is we're taking the image of another person, which is just a version of our dream, transmuting what really is the suffering of them and putting it into a new picture and saying like, oh, it has something to do with like me being an empath and I'm feeling other people's pain and stuff like that. And that can be hard because like, you know, if you really think about it, like even Buddha and Kuan Yin, no one walked them through their own states of enlightenment. All they could do was find people who were open to sharing that information. And as that information became available, they had to practice it and work with it to reach the next state. And there was like no way anyone could have just made that shift for you. So it's hard because you can't do it for anyone anymore. And back in the day, as a healer, I would have told you, hey, like you should be, if you can't move something, it's your fault. Like, yeah, you have the potential to move something as a healer, as a light warrior, but it's always taxing and it's not fulfilling. It's always like, man, I did that for that person, but will that person actually learn what they were supposed to learn? Or like, was the taxingness that I feel in my body worth getting that person that level of energy outside of them? It's always like this fine line. On the word balance, we have a question about the word balance, and the last question that we have too is what would they recommend to stay in balance and focus during this massive shift? Well, they kind of answered that already, that we have to like focus on ourselves. We need to answer the truth. I really like the fact that Buddha and Kuan Yin were both like, the only darkness that we really create is the truth that we don't want to actually acknowledge. When we don't look at a truth and we run away from that truth becomes our shadow. And with time, that shadow becomes darker and darker and darker until it becomes our darkness. And I think that's like really what's happening right now, is like we're being forced to look at all these things that have been happening for such a long time. And we haven't been accepting like these truths, and now all these truths has to be made, you know, like truths within ourselves, our communities, like how we've been living our lives, like what have been our priorities. Like there's so many things that are shifting right now for so many people, which is like we're being forced to look at our darkness or our shadow. And as we're doing that, life seems for some people to be hard, getting harder, right? Because they're not used to doing that level of practice of like looking at their own darkness. But if you're in this lecture right now, you understand that like everything that's happening right now has to be a moment of expansion, looking at your truth and letting go of attachment, practicing your ego. I really like the fact that Kuan Yin too, in another, she said that like, you know, when it comes to that about another question that someone posted about balance, like balance is understanding that you're androgynous, like, and it doesn't really matter what your experience in a 3D matter is. It's like your spirit has to evolve. Like, and that's something I've had to learn. Like for as a queer person, it's been so hard for me growing up in a society where like half of my tribe was like, yo, who cares? Like, you know, queer people, whatever, human being. And then like having another half of like my family being like, whoa, if you're not masculine, then whoa, there's something wrong with you, right? And like if you put yourself in either spectrum, you're always causing yourself a disservice. And to walk androgynally is really to walk in your own spirit. Like it's not this thing that's has to be difficult, because I've just read someone's like, how do you practice being androgynous, having a menstrual cycle? That's looking at the 3D aspect of what androgyny actually means. Like two-spirited people, they're two-spirited. Like their body doesn't have anything to do with the fact that they are two-spirited on their own. So like you have to come to this moment of like even forcing yourself to do things. Like I've really taken that upon myself where, you know, growing up as a queer person, like you're told like anything feminine is not of your gender, so it's wrong. And I've forced myself to just do things that are feminine because I want to push myself out of my comfort zone, right? Similarly, who's not really masculine could do something masculine to push themselves out of their comfort zone, and not automatically establishes some level of balance. And masculine doesn't always have to be like, oh yeah, like if you're a girl, let me dress really butch. And being feminine doesn't mean like, hey, you always have to put earrings on. But a lot of guys don't tap into femininity by embracing their own emotions. When they feel something, don't let me, I can't feel that. I can't feel that. I can't feel that. That's you, by you saying, hey, I'm going to actually take a moment to feel it, being a guy, that's you embracing your feminine energy. For a lot of women, like what ends up happening is like, they always feel like they have to be a provider or a nurturer, or they have to make themselves feel like a giver, right? They're so giving. And sometimes it's for you as a female to be like, I'm not going to do that today. Like, I don't really care what's going to go down. I'm going to focus all my energy on me. The moment you say you're doing that, you're being more masculine automatically. If you're someone who never speaks your truth, and this goes across the board for everyone, if you're somebody who always has a hard time saying no, if you're somebody who has a hard time expressing like some level of just hardcore facts, you're always suppressing like your masculine and your feminine. You're masculine because you won't actually speak your truth, and then you're feminine because you're not protecting your feminine by not saying, hey, this is what the feminine actually wants. This is what we both want, right? So a lot of times people see themselves as like more feminine or more masculine, but you have to understand that you have a couple inside of you, and when they're married, and this is something that comes up in Egyptian alchemy too, like when the internal structure, the yin and the yang, are married, you make any action and creation as a family, because this would be the child of those two components coming together. And then once you make a unison creation as a family, a cohesive whole, 3 has been a major number that's been coming up a lot lately in my esoteric writings. Like there's these, like 3 is always like this holy number that tells you about creation, you know, like the middle way, right? And 3 always comes up in so many different kinds of esoterica, whether it's explaining like the mechanics of something or a state of mind. And right now you have to understand that 3 is what really plays a huge role right now. Like the yin, the yang, and the neutral. Like those are the three that allow you to just fully step into creation. And once you understand that, like you can review things like my Atlantean alchemy post, where the internal you is the yin, the female. This conscious you that experiences things is the male, but all of that out there is the female again. So it's kind of like this constant ebb and flow, pushing back and forth. And when you're too female or you're too open, you're too chaotic. If you're too male, you're too linear, and you're too structured, so you don't allow yourself the opportunity to breathe and expand. So when it comes to being androgynous, it almost like creating a la carte stuff. Like you look at yourself and you're like, hey, like this masculine aspect is something that I need in my life. And that's something that I started doing to like balance my yin and my yang, was just kind of like being, and I'm gonna be just 100% honest with just everything how I've done it, but because I don't know how else to like say it other than be candid about it, or like just crude about it. Like I forced myself to go out days to a party dressed in like really feminine clothing, right? And being like, hey, I really like this style of clothing. That really looks cool with my style. Embracing that. It's allowed me to like step into that state of consciousness. And in sex, you can even practice that. If you're somebody who's usually really, really dominant in sex, you have a lot of yang energy. So give into yin energy, and next time you have sex, then be the submissive one. That's one really powerful way to like practice it. If you're always a submissive partner in sex, choose to actually be like dominant and call the shots. You're going to be automatically programming yourself into yang. And when you really practice it through sex and tantra and stuff like that, you actually rewire your yin and your yang like imbalance faster than you saying like, okay, I don't speak my truth all the time. Well, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to speak my truth next time I feel like I have to, right? But start in bed. Like in bed, you're like, I want it this way. We're doing it this way. Bam. And automatically you're shifting not only something so intimate and like one of your most primordial frequencies, but then that subconsciously rewrites your internal structure and your ego to say like, oh, the next time a coworker wants to step on your toes, like, no, that's not okay. This is how it's going to go down. And you can see how it's so much easier to transition your consciousness if you do it in a way that works for you. Mostly stepping into androgyny, like, and the other thing with androgyny is like we always think in one way, like you're always like Oculus Avalokitesvara tells us always to look at people's other point of view. So often, you're a man and you're like, oh, I don't understand why women do this, right? But it's like, okay, put yourself in the other person's point of view. Why is it that they do it that way? If you were a woman and this was happening to you, let your brain expand and reach that peak. Same thing with like a woman. With a man's perspective, you have to be able to look at that and be like, okay, I'm going to open up these doors to see a different spectrum of reality. And when you do that, like you're perpetually reconstructing yourself as you work in your internal reality. It's like a clock, really. And like most people see reality as like this one solid thing, but you don't really look at all these moving parts that work inside of this one solid clock. And it's part of it has to do with magnetism. Some of it has to do with reflection. Some of it has to do with dreaming. Some of it has to do with like just being okay with yourself. And I've noticed that the more I've been comfortable with myself, whether it's with what I'm wearing or who I'm talking to or whatever, my reality naturally has to shift because I can't be anything other than what I am. I most recently posted a meme on YouTube, on Instagram that said that like one of the Antojai frequency mantras for your sacral chakra is, I am what I am. What else could I be? And when you sit down with that and you then say, well, what am I? What am I if I am what I am? Well, I'm not a male, I'm not female. Like no aspects of myself in duality could pull me to either spectrum. But what are the best qualities that actually create a new being that states that I am androgynous? I'm beyond my thought forms that may be male and female, my actions that are male and female, the stories that people have created for me that are male and female. Like what does that, who is that person beyond that spectrum? And that person, again, that all of that right there will bring you back to nirvana or samadhi or compassion or wealth. Like I love how they really talked about how, you know, samadhi and nirvana can just be the same thing under a different perception of self if you reach that by understanding that it's in this present moment, right? And that's unique to every person's soul vibration, because not everyone's looking for the same thing. Just because we have millions of people looking for love, we don't, not everyone's looking for love in the same fashion. Some people are looking for love in a twin flame. Other people are looking for love in sense of like children, right? And they don't even need a partner, or they're just looking for love in a dog, or they're looking for love in their life, like just traveling and enjoying their life. So it's like this massive perception that the more we get attached to any one outcome, the more linear and harder our life becomes in general. That's why you have to become lucid and fluid. And I've noticed that my brain is literally, it always feels like it's doing this because, you know, I've taken a lot of LSD and psychedelics, and my brain has been trained to just do that. And when you really hit that peak where you're just allowing your mind to be like, oh, this one thing didn't work out for me today. It's okay. It's no big deal. Okay. Well, I'm going to keep flowing. I'm going to keep moving throughout reality, and things just work out because you're not fighting the current anymore. Like Taoism even tells you that. So it's like some really deep stuff you guys think about. Hopefully this podcast was very useful for you. There were a lot of questions, and I know I couldn't have gotten to all of them, but maybe next time we'll do another one of these since we had such a big turnout. Let me know in the comment section how you guys felt about it. If you guys liked it, send me a heart. If you guys didn't like it, just put a thumbs down or be like, ew. And I'll be like, oh my God. But it's Sunday and it's Easter. So what would Jesus do? Yay. So we got some hearts. So far, so good. It is so hot in here. And this is the last card that we're going to leave off today. It's Maitreya, and it's the power of joy. So find joy in the present moment. That's another thing. I've been talking to the goddess Iris. And Iris is the goddess of like the rainbow and about being present in this moment. So definitely like joy is something that we should be like finding every day within ourselves from now on. And you're gonna notice that as you find joy in everything that you're doing, you're gonna live in like a pseudo heaven, and you can spread that compassion with other people. Clarity session. If you ended up messaging me on, oh yeah, and this is the last thing I'm gonna say. If you're looking for one-on-one coaching, like go ahead and set up a clarity call with me, and we'll get you started in finding whatever blockages that you're dealing with, and see if you're good for a coaching program. But back to that question, if you sent me something on Instagram, I might have responded to you already. And if not, send me a message on Instagram, or just check out AntojaiQuantumAlchemy.com, and you can easily program it in there. And actually, I'll write this down for you. Give me 2 seconds. Man, I don't know what happened. Right now, my site's not pulling up, so I might have spelled it wrong. I don't know, but you should be able to see it. If my site's not on, just send me a DM, and I'll get you started, and we'll get that. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, he was. Well, that's a good card then. We're in alignment. So cool, you guys. Sending you all of my love. I will see you later. Have a good rest of your day. I got a bunch of new stuff that's going to be coming out on Patreon for classes and workshops. So Patreon is going to be more so like an academy where we can do more work. The next couple Tarot Tuesdays are going to be live, so you'll be able to actually ask me questions if you're a part of Patreon. And I can probably answer your questions that are more specific to you, because I normally do tribe readings. So we're going to be diving more into Atlantean alchemy this month on Patreon. I'm simultaneously creating the extended version of the neurocode. So if you're on Patreon, you'll eventually get access to one of the versions of the neurocodes that I've created. So it's a full course on the material. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So I'm sending you love. Have a good rest of your day.